No problem.
Good evening. Good evening, Meadowbrook family. This is Principal Brownlee. I'm glad that you're able to join us, and we will be going over our Meadowbrook family reopening plans, and we will be looking at learning, health, and safety. Our goals for tonight is to inform you about the reopening plan. We're going to have time to answer questions. Some of those questions we have received from questionnaires in the survey. And if there's additional questions that you may have, those can be submitted by using the QR code at the top of your screen, or you can access it by using the link there that we have there. And so it's also running at the bottom for you to be able to type in. Before we begin, I know the gravity of what we're embarking on, and we're doing this together. I'm having to make decisions about my own sons. I've got twin boys that are going into third grade. And so, we're looking at what are our learning options for them and what works best ultimately for our family, as it pertains to childcare, as it pertains to my work schedule. So I absolutely understand that we have this is not something to take lightly. So we are going to give you as much information as we possibly can so that you're able to make an informed decision. So we're going to address on-campus learning. We're going to talk about safety protocols as when students are on campus. We're also going to talk about the Virtual Learning Academy, alternative programs, and then we'll answer questions. And at the end, after we finish with the questions, we will, if you're in the Meadowbrook Academy, we're going to talk more about that. Again, this is the QR code, as well as a link so that you can ask questions. So we have three options. We have on campus or in-person learning. We have the Virtual Learning Academy, which is sometimes referred to as VLA, and we have alternative programs as well. So we'll look at option one first, on-campus learning, or also known as in-person. So for our in-person learning, it'll take place on campus for students when permitted by our guidelines. Currently, as you know, we're on San Diego County is on the watch list, so we would need to be off of the watch list for 14 days before we would be able to open up physically. And we'll talk a little more about what that could look like. But looking at it with our ultimate goal for the on-campus learning would be to get back to where we were prior to schools physically closing down. So our students will be provided with a classroom teacher to meet their academic and social emotional needs. We'll maintain current class maximum for both in-person and virtual learning in the classroom. We'll talk about what the phase-in plan will look like, but as far as the class size for, let's say, science, we're still going to keep it at the 35 to 38 students. And then the classroom will utilize the space, and we'll spread out desks and tables around the room as available. So if we were to come back, when we do or first come back, our school will utilize a hybrid plan to help transition students onto campus, taking into safety concerns. So with smaller groups of students. And in order to do that, this plan might include like an AM, PM, where students would come 5 days a week. They would come, there would be a half of the students would come in the morning, and the other half would come midday. Another option that we're exploring is what we call AB days. And so what that would look like, it could look like, would be some students come on some days, and then they would, for the full day, and then on other days, they would be participating from home virtually. So AB days could look like half students come 2 days a week, or 3 days a week, and then they would be at home learning on the other days. And again, the goal of doing that would be to reduce classroom sizes. And it would be a temporary model until we would be able to go back full scale to the classrooms. So health and safety measures. The safety of our students and staff is our number one priority. And we have what's called the Big Four. And with the Big Four, we need to do temperature and symptom screening, physical distancing as much as feasible. We're going to address face coverings and also increased sanitation. And so throughout the campus, we'll post signage that reminds us of these Big Four. So temperature, I'm sorry, technology. Sorry, I had started late. I thought I was recording when I wasn't recording live yet. But temperature and symptom screening, we have what's called passive screening and active screening. So the passive screening simply means that before students and staff come to school, they'll take their temperature. If it's above 100 degrees, then we ask that that you keep your student home or that the staff member stays home. Our active screening will be on campus. So we'll have different entry points for designated areas for our students to come through, where we will use touchless thermometers in order to take the student's temperature. If a student or staff has a temperature above 100 degrees, they will be not allowed on campus, isolated, and we would have a parent come and pick them up. And then it's just as far as screening, again, that will be daily, and then we would look for symptoms throughout the day. For the physical distancing, so the degree to which physical distancing is possible throughout our campus, it's going to be largely dependent on the number of families choosing the on-campus option. We, again, will do some sort of staggered schedule to decrease the amount of students on campus at one time to begin with when we first return. And students, they're going to be advised to stay physically distanced from each other. And again, we're going to do that to the best of our ability. For arrival and departure, we will have designated locations for entrance and exit, and we will have more than one entry point and exit point. Physical distancing in the classroom. We're going to maximize space between the seating, between the desks. Our staff will not come within 6 feet of students, so their teacher desk, for instance, will be separated from the students. Again, we're going to take into consideration smaller groups for activities and rearranging furniture to maximize space and distancing. During lunch on campus, the number of students per table may be limited, and then when possible, the number of areas which students may eat will be increased, and then increased supervision. For face coverings, it's mandated or required right now to wear a cloth face covering. This will be for all middle school students. There may be some students that for medical reasons or due to a disability, they're unable to wear a cloth face covering. We would also still encourage a face shield. But as far as the requirements are that all students and staff are required to wear a cloth face covering or mask for the duration of the day, except for when they're eating or drinking. We're increasing our sanitation. So we're adding hand washing stations and hand sanitizing stations to the campus. Staff will train students in appropriate hand washing techniques, and again, hand sanitizer will be available. There'll be promptings throughout the day from staff to encourage students to sanitize their hands multiple times throughout the day. It will also be encouraged before they eat lunch to make sure for them to have time to sanitize their hands first. As far as in the classroom for cleaning and disinfection, teachers are advised to avoid students from sharing electronic equipment, books, and learning materials. So our students will be assigned a Chromebook, and that Chromebook will be theirs to take to and from school and to use for the school year. So there will not be sharing of Chromebooks. Materials that are difficult to clean or to sanitize, those will be limited. We'll have, I think they're called electrostatic cleaners, where they will spray, our custodial staff will spray to disinfect areas, and they will pay special attention to high touch points, such as door handles, desktops, etc., handrails, and restrooms. So there's in the Poway Unified School District School Reopening Guidebook, there's on pages 12 and 13, there's some really good information that talks about if a student has is test positive, what are the protocols, and so on and so forth. So I highly encourage you to look at that. So students who develop a fever over 100 degrees and or have symptoms of the COVID illness while at school will be immediately separated from other students. So we have a designated area of where we can place students until parent can get there to pick up the student. And if a staff member develops symptoms while at work, they will be sent home immediately. And they will not be they won't return to work until they've met the CDC, CDC criteria, and to be able to discontinue the home isolation. So if the school's notified of a student or staff member who tests positive, um, administration, I will work with the district staff to notify affected parties. Its exposure is considered less than 6 feet for 15 minutes, is kind of how that's defined for quarantining. And the areas that were contacted will be disinfected as quickly as possible. And the district will adhere to public health guidelines for isolating positive cases or those that have been directly exposed to positive case. Students who are sent home for testing positive or being exposed to someone who tested positive will have access to instructional materials as if it was any other illness-related absence. I'm going to take a look at the Virtual Learning Academy. For the Virtual and Learning Academy, we are trying to move to site-based as much as feasibly possible. So we will have more information on who the teachers are going to be once teachers commit to whether they're going to be working in the Virtual Learning Academy or whether they're going to do in person. And maybe in some cases or instances, they might be working in both learning models. And so in the virtual learning model, students will receive virtual classroom learning 5 days a week from home. It will be standards-based instructions. It will be provided with a virtual classroom teacher. The lessons will be live and recorded. There'll be offline learning opportunities as well as virtual collaboration with other students, small group, large group, and all virtual learning platforms will be on Canvas, on what we call Canvas. And teachers have gone through training and will continue to go through professional development so that they're able to effectively use Canvas. Students will be following a virtual bell schedule to attend live instruction and required conversations. Then teachers will provide regular office hours, a homeroom, and opportunities for students to ask questions and work in collaboration with each other. And there will also be virtual learning will include physical education, PE. For students with an IEP, related services will be provided still and documented in each student's IEP. Alternative programs. We have 2 alternative programs. The first one is New Directions, which is an independent study program. This is for grades 6 through 12. And middle school students will take 4 classes at a time, and that'll mirror the pacing guides of Meadowbrook. And New Directions has an on-site learning center that's located at Twin Peaks, and students can receive specialized support for their classes there. Rather than daily instruction, parents and guardians are actively involved in the daily work completion and academic progress of their student. And each family will determine the study hours that fit within the family schedule. So the other alternative program is the Poway Home Education Program. And this is for students that are in grades, transitional kindergarten through 8th grade. So when looking at the different options, if it's going to be a long-term if joining for a long term, might want to consider the New Directions program just because they can continue the program in high school. But again, whatever is best for you and your family. And with the home education program, parents are provided with district curriculum and instructional materials to teach their child at home. The teachers meet regularly with the student and parents to monitor progress and support learning. The parent and student determine the 4 to 5 hour per day schedule that works best for them to complete the week's curriculum. And then if your students that are part of the Poway home education program are still enrolled at their home school. So for the question and answer, some of the questions, we'll just go over some of the questions that we had received. One of the questions was, how will Meadowbrook Middle School orient 6th grade students? So 6th grade orientation. So we will provide an orientation and well experience for all incoming 6th grade students, whether it's in person or virtual. I think it's very important for them to have that experience. This may take place during the first week of school, or it could take place the week before school starts. But we'll provide more information once we work that out. Next question, will students be required to wear masks at all time when they're on campus? And what will happen if a student does not comply with wearing a mask? So yes, students are required to wear cloth masks when they're on campus, again, unless they're exempt for medical condition or disability. If there's a refusal to comply, where they just refuse to put the mask on, it may result in the student being educated in an alternative learning environment, meaning they may have to receive their learning via a virtual setting. Next question, will students be divided into pods or cohorts? And so although we're taking measures to strategically reduce the number of students on campus at any one time with a staggered schedule, we will not be creating separate learning pods or cohorts of students. That is more feasible at an elementary school because they're in self-contained classrooms. But for our students in secondary, they move from class to class. They have several teachers. Next question, what electives and or special academic programs will be offered in the Virtual Learning Academy? We'll have more information once teachers and students choose their learning model. Then we'll be able to determine which courses will be offered for the Virtual Learning Academy. And this is largely because we're using our own staff, and we don't know yet which teachers will need to teach virtually and which ones will be teaching on campus. And so for some of our special programs, such as, I'm just going to take one, intensive Spanish, right? So we're going to have to try and get creative with the intensive Spanish to be able to offer it. So I'm not sure what that would look like yet. It could be that the teacher is on campus, and then we deliver, virtual learning experience still for the students to be able to join in or stream in, or it might be we share a teacher with another school site to help us to be able to cover both, or it might be that that a teacher might teach in both learning models. So once we get information about which students need the opportunity and which teachers where they're going to commit, then we'll have we'll have a better idea of what we're going to be able to offer. Next question, will I have the opportunity to change learning models after committing to on-campus virtual learning academy or one of the available alternative programs? So in the mid-year, there will be an opportunity to reassess reassess the learning model that you had chose, whether or not we're able to place you in a different learning model. That access will be based on availability. So do we have room in classrooms to place the student there to change? How will my student be graded on their report card was a question that came up, and students will receive a letter grade reflecting their academic progress. So in the spring, it was credit, no credit, and this time all learning models will have an actual grade assigned. And with that, I am going to work with my assistant principal to see if there were other questions. Brent, I'm going to add you to the stream, if that's okay. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Will students be moving from class to class, or are they in the same room all day? So students will be moving from class to class. And as far as the pattern of movement, for physical distancing, we are going to work as hard as we can to put something in place for the flow of traffic, of foot traffic. Do we have another one, Brent? Sorry for the pause. We're using new software. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, Brent, do you want me to pull you in, or do you want me to read the yes? Okay. Sounds good. Hi, Brent.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, Crystal, sorry, I thought it'd be easier if I just read some of these off because there's a lot of the same.
I think so.
Popping up here. Okay. One of the first questions that popped up multiple times was regarding the decisions parents have to make and when the decision will be made by the school or the district relative to the AM/PM or AB option and how that plays into the timeline for decision making for parents.
Okay. So we're still exploring the AB model. So parents will need to make a decision prior to what that phase in will look like. The main takeaway is, one, how comfortable are you with your student being around other students on campus? And so, for instance, if there's a health concern, then I would look at, well, would virtual maybe be a better option for the family? We are still in the process of trying to decide what works best to meet student needs and scheduling, whether it would be AM/PM or whether it would be the AB model. Right now, I mean, we really are probably going to be looking at the pros of the difficulties of AB model. So I can't say for sure which one we're going to go with, but a decision would need to be made prior.
One of the other veins that popped up was some clarification around the masks and whether or not those will be required again all day, and in what circumstances students would be allowed to remove them, whether that's during PE or lunch or otherwise.
Okay, so during PE, students will still be required to wear masks. We're working to see what we can do creatively for things like band and choir and performing arts. So we're still working on that right now. But as far as masks, I would say the only time they would come off would be if during lunch to eat. But the mask, if they were moving around campus, the mask would need to be placed on them. Did that?
Yeah, and related question that's popped up about 3 times now is still about the cloth masks versus the fiberglass face shields. Several of our participants are asking if they send their student to school with a face shield, will they still be required to wear a mask?
So students will be required to wear a mask. A cloth covering is what is stated by the guidelines.
Okay. Couple of questions here regarding transportation in particular. And again, the questions vary dependent on the model, but parents asking, should they wait to purchase their bus passes until we know that we'll be returning to an on-campus learning experience versus distance learning?
So for the bus passes, I mean, can you say that again? Because
so parents.
I don't know if I understand.
Right. So if school year starts September 2, and assuming we go back to a distance learning environment because San Diego's still on the watch list, a couple of people are asking, does it matter when I purchase my bus pass, or should I wait until we know we're coming back to do so? To an on-campus experience.
Could wait. They can wait.
Okay. Another couple questions. I know we mentioned plans if there is a positive case on campus. So just a couple of repeat questions here about how and when parents or stakeholders will be notified if there is a positive COVID case on campus. And related question, will an entire class be quarantined if one student in that class has come down with the virus?
Okay. Sorry, let me go to my. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So if there's a student that has a positive, just to start off, if a student has a positive test, we are notified by the CDC, and then we follow protocol by notifying students that have been affected by that student with a positive case. So the student who tested positive would stay home for 14 days. And then if other students in the class, if they were within, in close proximity, then they could, be quarantined as well. So I guess it depends on who they were around.
Another few questions about ACES. Parents wondering if ACES will be offered.
So ACES is working. I mean, they're working on now what that's going to look like. But I don't have at this time information about, if it's going to be an all-day structure or what that's going to look like.
Okay. Let me just go through and try to relate some of these more transportation questions. Specific classes. So Math 6-7 compacted comes up a couple of times here. Wondering if that program will be offered if the VLA option is chosen.
Yeah, we're gonna work to offer compacted math in both scenarios. Whether or not it's taught by a Meadowbrook teacher, that I won't be able to speak to that because we don't know yet.
If a student has to be quarantined for any reason, how will they continue to receive instruction?
So a teacher would still give the student the curriculum for the time that they're out, just as we would with any other illness. Yeah. I see a lot of questions in the chat about Academy. We will be addressing Academy if you're joining us a little late. We will be addressing questions in the Academy and what that will look like after we finish the Q&A.
Okay. Quite a few questions, Crystal, regarding the scheduling for VLA. I know we don't necessarily have the granular level detail there, but quite a few questions popping up that they look like as far as the VLA option.
So I don't have like a sample schedule of what it's going to look like yet, but as far as what will be included daily would be, again, there's going to be in-person instruction. Virtually, there'll be small group lessons as well as independent work. And that'll be daily.
Okay, quite a few more Academy questions, which I know we'll get to in a short time here. Okay, passing periods. This one came up again. As far as students moving, if they choose the on-campus environment, will students still be moving between classes, and how will we work to control that traffic flow?
Right. So we won't be able to stagger the release of students, so they will be coming out of the classrooms at the same time. So some thoughts around it is to maybe have flow of traffic on one side go in a particular direction, and then the flow on the other side to go in a particular direction. The problem with that might be, though, is that a student might need to cross over to get to another class. So when it comes to physical distancing, educating the students on staying 6 feet apart as they walk in the hallways, having people out there to monitor to the best extent possible.
A couple questions about extracurricular activities, science Olympiad, math club, robotics, those kinds of things. Will those clubs or activities continue to take place?
I know robotics right now is looking into a virtual option for robotics, but I guess we'll get there as we move along.
Okay. This one has popped up a few times. I think we should address it. Some questions about why it is that in our middle school setting, teachers aren't the ones moving and roving between classes and cohorts of kids versus the kids having to translate between classes.
So some of our classrooms are set up with, materials like art rooms and things like that. So I don't know how feasible it would be for a teacher to move with all their stuff to another classroom and to go from classroom to classroom. Plus, I'm wondering logistically, the students aren't moving in cohorts, so they have different electives in different classes. So the student has to move. It couldn't be the teacher. right? Elementary, maybe you could do that because you would have all one grade level, all the same content. But for middle school, we have multiple classes.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the element of student choice is the key there. Students are choosing elective courses. Students, in some cases, have at the same grade level different math levels, and so the cohorting doesn't allow for too much flexibility there as far as teachers roving in particular. I've seen this about 4 or 5 times about gifted, GATE identified students. Number one, will testing still be occurring as usual during the school year for identifying students? Will those things be taking place? And will there still be any supports or activities for students in our gifted program?
So for the gifted program, we don't have homogenous where it's all GATE classes. So they're either in an advanced class if the family chooses, or they're in a cohort, a cluster where they're with other students that are in GATE. So we'll continue to differentiate for our GATE students. As far as testing goes, are we talking about the GATE tests, or are we talking about state tests?
No, the GATE tests came up in particular. Will students still be available to be able to take that test? I'm assuming in many cases 6th or 7th grade for new identification.
Right. Okay. So I don't have that information right now, but I would imagine we're still going to do testing because even for our math, for our accelerated math, we figured out a way for students to be able to take them at home.
And just to clarify for our participants, it seems that there are 2 different strands going on. So we are actually looking at the Google form where we have a little over 50 questions right now. And then we're also kind of monitoring the YouTube live stream, but we are primarily looking at that Google form for questions. So if you do have them and we haven't gotten to it yet, do understand that we'll be following up with some FAQs pulled from that. Right now, what we're trying to do is pool questions that are similar so that we can get as many of them answered in this form as possible.
And then we will go back and look at the form and create a frequently asked question document. And also, again, you'll be able to go back and review this this video as well. So why don't we do maybe 2 more, Brent, and then I'm going to move on to Academy.
Okay. Let's see.
You know what? I think I need to shut down.
Yeah, we have a couple
of chat. Yeah. Whoops.
And while you're doing that, one of the other questions that continues to pop up.
I can't shut it down though, but can you?
I don't know.
I can't do it without leaving because I'm getting an echo.
I don't have that control. I don't think to shut it down on the YouTube.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The question was about class size though, and I guess this also depends on the model, but in either case, the question was around if our class size maximum is, let's say, 30 to 35 students, how are we going to guarantee that we won't actually see 30 to 35 students packed into a classroom? So regardless of the model, is that going to look like, and how are we going to try to maintain the distancing?
Can you do that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think I can answer it too, if you don't mind. So
yeah, no.
One of the questions that popped up a few times was about class size maximums or caps to guarantee that social distancing could be achieved. And so I know we said 30 to 35 kids in a class. I want to clarify that we are not talking about putting 35 students into one room at any one time. Regardless of the model that is chosen, whether that's AM, PM, or an staggered day, the reason for those models being explored is to allow for reducing the number of students that are on campus at any one time. And by virtue of that, to allow us to schedule classes so that we're not seeing over what would be approximately 50% of an average class size. So you might see 35 students rostered into a class in our back end and our scheduling. But when I show up in that classroom, you're probably not going to see more than 17 or 18 of those students actually live bodies in the classroom being instructed by a teacher. All right, let's take one more, I guess, here, Crystal.
Hey, you know what? I really need to shut the chat down. So
yeah, let's do that.
I'm gonna mute myself and go in and try and close that down. It wasn't supposed to be enabled, so I'm not sure why that happened. Are you okay, Brent?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm gonna try and remove this person here.
Hey, Brent, why don't we move on to, I'm going to move on to, while you're doing that, I'm going to move on to the academy, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The only other thing I was going to bring up, I think this is applicable to both, and it's the last question I think that we should address. There was a question regarding 504s and special education in particular. I know that that's a longer conversation, but as far as what services may be available to students on campus versus the virtual learning academy if the student has an IEP or a 504 plan.
So we're still going to provide special education services regardless of the learning model that is chosen. So it could look like we could have an instructional assistant working virtually with a student in a small setting to help support learning. So regardless of whether it's in person or virtually, as it's written in the IEP, we will honor that and still provide services.
All right. And like Principal Brownlee said, everybody who's listening to this broadcast, we have quite a few questions in that Google form. We will be providing some written follow-up tomorrow. So just please be aware that that will be forthcoming.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and so I want to thank everybody for coming, and I'm going to go ahead now and transition to the academy for questions that are surrounding that model. So again, thank you so much, and we'll be pushing out a frequently asked question for questions that we were unable to get to live tonight. So this is the Meadowbrook Middle School Academy. First, we're going to talk about on-campus learning. And I'm going to ask that you're patient with me. There's still a lot of unknowns as far as, you know, how many students in the academy do we have that are going to be choosing in-person or a virtual model. So for academy teachers, our academy teachers, our current ones, they may choose to teach virtually, or they may not be available for in-person instruction. So this might mean that academy students would be taught by another highly qualified teacher. And we'll do our best to cohort students and keep them together. Again, this is dependent on how many academy students choose on-campus learning. There may be a need to create classes comprised of both academy students and general Meadowbrook students, and it will be dependent on, again, numbers. So let me just give you an example. If I have 20 students in a section that are academy, I would need to put, another 15 students in the class in order to have a full section. So we will still offer 2 electives for the on-campus academy students. Once teachers and students choose their learning model, we'll be able to determine which courses will be offered. So we're committed, though, to thinking outside of the box. Some teachers might teach courses with a learning platform in both learning platforms, or we may share staff with other campuses. So we have some teachers that teach specialized classes. So we spoke a little bit about that earlier, about trying to get creative to make sure we can offer as much as possible. For the virtual learning, so we're going to do our best to offer an academy experience for students selecting the virtual learning option. Again, this is dependent upon teacher availability and the number of students selecting the option. So students may receive their experience from other highly qualified teachers who may or may not be a part of the Meadowbrook staff. And then also, we have to look and see what electives are we going to be able to provide in a virtual learning environment. If we are able to offer an academy experience, the student would receive 2 electives. So again, there's a lot of unknown behind whether or not it will be offered in the virtual learning program. But we're going to do our best to try and make it happen. There was some questions about what would happen if a family chooses virtual learning and we're unable to offer the academy to the student. We would look at working with the district to look at refunding donation. And that was a lot of the questions that we had. Does that sound right, Brent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still seeing a couple of the questions repeating about the virtual learning academy and the number of electives. And I think we mentioned it, but just to reiterate, our effort there is going to be to offer 2 electives for academy students if they are in the virtual learning academy option. But that is something that's going to be, again, dependent upon some decisions having made by teachers and by parents, right?
Right.
That we're hoping to do. Crystal, another few questions about ASB, and this, I guess, is kind of applicable across both groups.
Sure.
Asking if ASB is still going to be offered and if it's still going to be taking place as we would normally have it take place during the school.
Right. ASB is, it's what we call a singleton. But we're going to work to be creative about being able to offer ASB. Again, I'm not sure what that will look like. I'm not sure if we'll be able to offer it in the virtual learning setting. But we're gonna try and do both. So we need to look and see which students are where. And then we also need to look at the teacher and see where they're at as far as ASB goes. So I just don't, unfortunately, have a answer right now for that.
Another question that popped up a few times, specific in this case to Academy, but I guess it's applicable across the board, is whether or not students will have the opportunity to modify their elective choices once information comes in about what is actually available in on campus versus the virtual learning academy experience.
Mm-hmm. I guess we're going to have to look and see if we can accommodate, because if we can accommodate, I don't want to say we're going to push out a new course request form. It might just be based on, like, if there's a certain particular course that's not offered and the student had signed up for it, then I would think we would look and see, well, what was their third choice on their course request form, and then go from there, instead of getting a whole new, do you know what I mean? Instead of starting all the way over.
I'm looking at a couple of questions that came up here about which classes will be offered and why we can't commit. I just want to reiterate what Principal Brownlee had covered earlier, in that if I have a very unique class that is traditionally taught by one teacher who has the appropriate credential to teach that class, and that teacher, for any reason, is not going to be teaching in the on-campus or the virtual environment, that may change how and when that course will be available or offered for our students. So that's why it's not so much a straightforward response, because we have to wait to see what our individual educators are also opting for when they make their choices this week as well.
Right, and all that information we won't have, because the teacher commitment does not close until the 31st, as well as our student commitment. And we need time to build 2 schedules now. So essentially, we need to plan for 2 schools, and we can't do any of that planning until we have people selecting what platform they're going to be in.
Another clarification just about the terminology. I've seen this pop up actually a few times as well. The Virtual Learning Academy, that title was district-led to be applicable across all schools, so that there was some uniform language and terminology, not to be confused with Meadowbrook's Academy program. So understand, definitely the similarities can be a little confusing there, but that is not the intent. So just to clarify again, Virtual Learning Academy has nothing to do per se with the Meadowbrook Academy that we understand and know, and for those of you
with the Meadowbrook.
Exactly. So just to be very clear on that piece.
And I know that you have to make a decision and that there's some unknowns. My best suggestion would be, make a decision based off of what is the need of the family as far as your concerns with in-person, so being around other students and staff, versus do you need them to be separated from, in a virtual learning environment. So I would use that as my lens when making my decision. Not which teachers are going to be teaching virtual and which teachers are going to be on campus, because we don't have that information. So, I mean, I think health and safety would be the number one factor and your comfort level with student returning in person. Yeah. As far as I see in the chat, I see questions about, will we be able to move, mid-year? And then again, it's going to be based off of availability. So are we able to place students, like, is there enough teachers and students that want to return to campus so that we can provide those learning opportunities, and do we have the space available for them to come back? So I think did we cover pretty much, because we're right at an hour. Yep. And I know there's other presentations tonight. So, and as far as Academy parents, as far as changes and so on and so forth, as we move forward, we can have another meeting to discuss the Academy at a later date and time when we have more information. And again, we'll look at the FAQ, and if there was something that we can answer that wasn't answered, we will look to push that information out to you. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming, and I know that these times are difficult, and again, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my own children and my situation, and so I appreciate you being in the boat with me. So we're going to make it together. Bottom line is, regardless of if you're virtual, if we're on campus, we are committed to providing a world-class education for all our students. And we're going to make this happen as far as getting through it together. And I really do appreciate the communication and everything else that we've had together over since the springtime. So we are going to have more parent communication with each other. I'm going to hold more coffee with the principals or tea with the principals if it's in the afternoon, for us to make sure that we're together and we're in this together and that we move forward together. And I think we're going to be just fine. It'll be just fine. So pick and choose based off of what's best for your family, and just know you're going to have a good experience. We're going to make it happen. So thank you all so much. And I hope you have an amazing night, and we will be back in contact with you. All right. Thank you.